From the heart of Hawkeye Nation comes the show that dissects the plays, debates the calls, and celebrates the victories. This isn't just a podcast. This is your unfiltered access to the mind of two diehard fans. They live and breathe black and gold, and they're here to give you the honest, raw takes you won't find anywhere else. Get ready for deep dive analysis, passionate debate, and a unique perspective on the team you love. This is Punting is Winning with JD and Keith.
Welcome back, Hawkeye fans, to another episode of Punting is Winning, your All Iowa podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Keith. He's JD. Welcome back to the postseason edition of the podcast, I guess, for lack of a better term. First things first, last week's question of the week. What bowl game do we anticipate Iowa going to? Congratulations to Kelvin. You nailed it right on the head with Vandy and Tampa. So Iowa is playing Vanderbilt in the ReliaQuest Bowl on New Year's Eve, not on New Year's Day, which is the normal day that we would play, which kind of sucks for those of us that have to work on New Year's Eve.
11 a.m. Central.
Yeah, 11 a.m. to 2. Yep. Yeah, I'm going to have to figure out a way to get that game in. So, yeah, it sucks, but it is what it is. You got a new question of the week for this week?
New question of the week is, should Notre Dame have made it in the playoff ahead of Alabama? What is your opinion? That's the question.
Have some strong opinions about that.
And I have a strong opinion as well.
Well, let's just jump right into it.
We got a lot to cover tonight.
Yeah, let's just talk. First, let's talk a little bit conference championship games. Anything jump out to you that surprised you, or kind of went the way you thought it would, didn't go the way you thought it would? What?
I knew that this Indiana-Ohio State game was going to be a close one. In fact, I had mentioned that a couple of different times to people that, people were saying, hey, Ohio State's going to walk away with this. They're going to win by 14. I said, I don't think so. I think Indiana's better than you think they are. Indiana ended up winning this game 13-10 on a very low Iowa-esque kind of game. A lot of defense, tight red zone defense by both teams. Was I shocked by the result? No, I think Indiana's really good. I don't think people are giving them the credit. I think Curt Cignetti is one heck of a coach. I think he has those kids ready to go each and every week, and he has a game plan that works. And as long as he continues to do that, this guy will be a star. I mean, a star. He may already be a star.
The only thing that's going to hold him back is his age. How long is he going to be able to continue to coach? He's up there about the same age as Ferentz, maybe just a little bit younger.
I think he's a little younger, but
he's in mid-60s.
He's really hungry for an older coach. He's a very brilliant mind when it comes to football. He's surrounded himself with like-minded people on his coaching staff, and what they've done at Indiana is nothing short of miraculous. That's all I'm saying. They are doing things that I don't believe anyone, even if you'd have said 2 years ago, Indiana's going to win the Big Ten championship, they're going to be the number one team in the nation, and they're going to be the number one team going into the playoffs, they'd have said, you are absolutely out of your mind. And here we are.
It's historically one of the worst programs in college football. And I mean, kudos to them. They caught lightning in a bottle. They got what they needed. It's few and far between that actually does happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in the wake of the championship weekend.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about that. I had made a comment. I was gone most of Saturday, so I didn't get a chance to watch any of the game at all. But I did make a comment in passing to Dad on Saturday that I said, I hope that it's I'd like to see Indiana win, and I hope it's a 3-point game, because I sure would hate to give any of the talking heads any ammunition to try to drop one or the other two teams down below, 1 and 2, because I think they are the two best teams in the country. at this point. And, to say, well, one team loses and you drop them down to third or fourth would be a travesty, in my opinion. So to have it be a 3-point game, have it be a low-scoring game, defensive struggle, it kind of worked out exactly kind of how I thought it would or hoped it would. And it would have been – I think there would have been rioting in the streets if a 3-point game like that and you dropped one of the two teams down to like fourth or fifth, which I think they would have liked to have done. It's to prop up a Georgia team that's in the top 4 to get them into the top 2. But I think they got it right. They couldn't really justify doing it. I mean, they did some things that weren't justifiable in the first place. And we'll talk about that here in a bit. But I think that worked out really well for the conference and for both institutions that, it being a 3-point game was probably the coup de grace for that. And that's perfectly how it should have wrapped up. Because, I mean, I firmly believe they are the 2 best teams in the country.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that right now.
And at this point, I'm not sure that Texas Tech's not number 3.
Well, we'll see. They do play a playoff game, and we'll see how this all shakes out. And one of the things we talked about this a little bit, and it came to fruition last year, was that where you play these games early is a determining factor on who I think is going to come out victorious. Because, last year with it being cold weather games, look at Tennessee, they just basically folded when they got into that cold weather. And I think there's going to be teams like, if Georgia ever has to go, and I don't think Georgia, where they're sitting at number 3, will ever have to play in a cold weather environment. They will, by the time, if they win their first game after having a bye, then they will be playing in a warm weather area, not a dome or someplace like that.
Well, your second round games are your bowl games, your Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Cotton Bowl, Sugar Bowl, I think, maybe.
And I think that's unfortunate, because I think you should have Indiana get to play
a home game,
more than one home game.
Well, they don't even get to play one home game.
Why don't they? They're number 1 seed. They should have they
have a bye.
Well, I thought that
nope. The first round is all on higher seed campus home fields. So like you'd have Oklahoma gets the home field advantage over Alabama, Oregon over JMU. I'm trying to think of who else.
Why was I thinking that Penn State played their second round game at home last year?
Because Penn State didn't finish in the top 4.
But I thought they played at home, their second game against SMU.
Their first game they did.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
that would have been the first game. That would not have been the second game.
Okay.
So anyway, the first round is on home sites for the higher seed. The second round, which gets you down to the round of 8. Is that right? 8? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's at the Orange Bowl. Maybe it's the Orange Bowl, Sugar Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Rose Bowl, something like that. The major bowl games, the old BCS bowl games.
Mm-hmm.
And then your semifinals and finals. I don't know if maybe that's going to be, I don't know which bowl games they are this year, because I didn't really pay that close attention. I know that
Sugar and Orange maybe, or something.
I know that Indiana plays in the Rose Bowl, their first game in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it looks like they'll get the winner of the Oklahoma-Alabama game, which I like that, because I think they're better than both those teams anyway. And, honestly, just to shut the SEC up.
Well, we'll see how it all plays out. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, and there's a lot to uncover here. And I know that we'll have other podcasts, so we're not going to try to break it all down tonight.
No.
But we are going to get some things out that we think that are worthy of this week's discussion.
Well, speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about the selection committee and the teams that got in and the teams that got left out. Yeah. You mentioned it before with Notre Dame. Should Notre Dame have got in? My opinion is, with their record, yeah, they should have over Alabama. But I don't think they should have over Miami. I think Miami deserved to be in off of the head-to-head win over Notre Dame. with the same record and a head-to-head win, that is kind of to me, that's a no-brainer. I mean, yeah, I think their schedules are comparable to each other because Notre Dame gets to pick their schedule and Miami doesn't. So they kind of make that a wash a little bit, but that head-to-head has to play heavily into that. But we just set a precedent now by putting Alabama in with 3 losses and basically saying it doesn't matter what you do in your conference championship game if you're an SEC team. You can lose, and you can lose badly and be humiliated in that game and still make the playoffs and not drop or not move whatsoever in the rankings. And to me, that was put in play long before the game was even happening. They had made it their goal to put Alabama in because there was too much backlash last year that Alabama didn't get in. They should have been in. They're one of the, they didn't want to deal with it this year. Well, problem is now they're dealing with it with Notre Dame. And now there's the Notre Dame clause going into next year that as long as they're in the top 12, they're in the playoffs regardless.
Let's talk about Notre Dame. While I am, anybody that knows me knows that I don't care at all for Notre Dame. I can't stand Notre Dame. It's just ingrained into me as a young child that Notre Dame is hated. So I don't have any love for Notre Dame. However, I do want to say this. I believe they deserve to be in over Alabama.
I agree.
And what they then did when they weren't selected, I have a problem with, is they're so arrogant that if we don't make the playoff, we don't want to play in one of your lesser known bowl games that nobody cares about. And in my opinion, there needs to be a penalty for that. And that penalty to me should be that you don't get to play postseason next year. There needs to be something.
Now, any team that opts out of a bowl game should have that penalty.
There should be, though, the exception, and here's the exception. Iowa State, Kansas State, both opted out, even though they were eligible. And I will give them the exception in this reason. They both lost their coaching staff. And they did it right before the championship weekend. So that doesn't give them the opportunity to provide a coaching staff in a matter of a few weeks and having kids that may transfer to the new coach or where the old coach is going. There just is too many things right there to be able to then transport a team to a bowl and then compete in that said bowl. That is the exception to the rule. Kansas State. Let me ask you this.
There's an exception to the rule there, but Washington State didn't opt out, and they're losing their coach.
But now let me ask you, because I don't know this question. I don't know the answer to this. Is Jimmy Rogers actually going to coach Washington State through the bowl game, or is he completely done?
I don't know, but that's the point, though, is they're still losing their coach. If he doesn't coach them, somebody else is stepping in to do it. They didn't opt out. So why do you give the exception to Kansas State and to Iowa State?
Well,
why do you give the exception to the other teams that have now opted out with the Central Florida, the
5 and 7 teams,
Kansas? Yes,
I understand the 5 and 7 teams not saying no is because they've already shut down everything. They knew they weren't bowl eligible, and at the end of that season, when their season ended, whatever 2 weeks ago or a week ago, and they said, we're done. They've handed their uniforms in. They knew they weren't going to a bowl, so they were just shut everything down. And all the kids that are on campus have either gone home for holiday, whatever it is, and they're not there. That I get. So those 5 and 7 teams, I understand they're opting out, even if they were invited. But Iowa State and Kansas State, they were fined $500,000 for opting out. So they even though they don't have coaching staffs, they still got fined. So, the exception is that you don't play in the bowl game, but you still have to pay the $500,000 fine from the conference.
To me, I feel like if I'm a player, and maybe, and I don't know the ins and outs of what happened. If I'm a player, I'm probably a little miffed about the fact that teams have opted out, because do I want to look at the last game as being the last game? I want to play as much as possible. That's the way I would look at it. I get it. Maybe the players did say, they took a players meeting and they said, no, we just don't feel like it. And it's, but, even go back to the 5 and 7 teams. It was a week ago. You don't think those guys can be pulled right back in and say, hey, we got an opportunity here to get 15 more practices and to play another game to get better going into next year?
Well, I agree that there should have been at least that discussion with those, but if they had already shut everything down and half the team had gone home for the holidays, and now all of a sudden they're expected to come back, because these colleges between New Year's or between Thanksgiving and Christmas, they only have like about a week, and it's all finals, and then they're gone again for 3 or 4 weeks, and then they come back mid-January to start things back up again.
Finals don't happen until next week, but I mean, regardless, it's I don't know. As an athlete or as a player or whatever, I don't know that I would want my season to end that way. Even though I thought it ended, if I had another opportunity, if somebody said, hey, you guys finished 5 and 7, but there's been enough teams opting out that, we'd like to invite you because you're next on the list, I'd be like, yeah, absolutely. I'll take those extra practices. I'll take that extra money that's going to go to the university and go to the conference to be split and shared. Absolutely. I'd be all over that. I'd be like, yeah, let me grab my guys. But, whatever. I'm glad that we're not in a position where we can say we want to opt out. I don't think Iowa would ever opt out of a bowl game.
Well, not under this administration anyway. And I would probably not like it myself as a fan. But one of the things is, just opting out of pure arrogance is not cool with me. You're 10-2 Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. What makes you think you're better than everybody else that you just say, we didn't make the playoff, we don't want to play a bowl game? Let's talk about bowl games. Let's go to it. And let's take this another step. Let's take this a step further. Bowl games, the lesser known bowl games. Is there excitement in that anymore? Does that draw people in anymore? The ReliaQuest Bowl probably will bring, some people, because that's a decent matchup. But some of these other bowls, do you see people saying, oh man, I gotta tape that if I'm not home, or I gotta watch that? No, I mean, some of these people are now focused almost entirely on the playoff. And these bowl games, I know, but purists like you and me that watch games and love football, the ones that they couldn't care less, they're concentrating on the blue bloods, the 12 teams that are in the playoff. They're concentrating on them, and that everything else is afterthought. The problem is you're creating an issue here that you're cracking the whole structure, and the cracks are getting bigger every year. If you allow teams to continue to opt out, and with no penalty whatsoever of anything that's other than a fine of $500,000 or whatever, you're going to start seeing these teams saying, I want to opt out. I don't want to play this. I don't want to opt out. I want to play this. And then all of a sudden you've got 5 and 7 teams. You got 4 and 8 teams that are going to be starting to play bowl games because you can't find people to fill them. Then you have sponsors who are sponsoring some of these bowl games, and they're going to say, hey, I'm sponsoring this. It's costing me $2 million to put my name on this. Nobody's watching this bowl game. My sponsorship is wasted. That $2 million I gave to sponsor this bowl game, I no longer want to do this. And then you're sitting there with a bowl committee, the Armed Forces Bowl or whatever. They're sitting there saying, we've got a bowl. We got no sponsor. What are we going to do? We can't pay the teams to come play in this bowl game without sponsorships. So now you're losing bowl games. So I think pretty soon you're either going to have to expand the playoff, or you're just going to have to put 4 or 5 bowl games other than the playoff games. That's it. You can't, this is a precedent that is going to get worse and worse and worse the farther we get down the line. If you open this up and say, okay, it's fine, you can opt out, anybody that doesn't make the playoffs, a blue blood like Michigan, like down the line, like Notre Dame did this year, they're going to say, if we don't make the playoff, we don't want to play. It's not worth it for us.
I think that's where your reasoning of you've got to penalize them.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you don't want to play this year, you're not going to play next year. I don't care how good you are. I don't care if you even qualified for the playoffs. You're not going to be in them because you didn't want to play in a playoff. You didn't want to play in a postseason game the year before. Why would we say that you'd want to play in it now? Just because it's a higher prestige. It's like saying I'm not going to cover a game because it's beneath me, but if it's a playoff game, I'm going to cover it. You know, there was a certain broadcaster in our hometown that wouldn't broadcast a game unless it was a big game. Well, you have other people that were willing to do it when it was a regular season game, but I won't do it unless it's a playoff or a state tournament game. Well, that's a bunch of crap. If you don't want to cover the regular games, I only want to cover the higher profile games, then if you're not going to make a high profile game one year, you're not going to make it the next year either. Sorry.
So
I agree with you.
What does it look like for Notre Dame if they were to say, okay, Notre Dame, you're next year, you could go 12-0 and you're still not going to make a bowl game or the playoff. What do you think that's going to do to their recruiting? Kids are going to come in and say, well, you can't go to the bowl or play a bowl game or a playoff next year. Why would I want to come as a transfer from some other school? Why would I want to come to Notre Dame when I know for a fact that no matter how good we do, and no matter how many yards I make, I'm not going to play in the playoff?
Unless you're doing it for your NFL prospects.
That right there is what would absolutely end this opting out.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can't recruit a kid from the transfer portal and have that kid say to you and honestly and look you in the eye and say, Coach, I'm not coming to your school because you aren't going to be able to play in a playoff and I want to play in a playoff next year. Even though you have a great team and you would have made it last year, but you lost one game too many and you got left out. But next year you have a really good team coming back, but you opted out of a bowl game and you're not going to play in a playoff next year. I'm not coming to your school.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think there should be penalties for it, but
here's another thing.
This day and age, it's not going to happen.
This not opting out, this missing the playoff for Notre Dame just goes back and just enhances the whole thought of Notre Dame, you need to join a conference. Period. This has been talked about for way too long. You need to join a conference.
Let me ask you this question then. Let's say Notre Dame joins the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does that make, because the big question right now is, well, the SEC and the Big Ten are the premier conferences. They get the most teams in. Does that allow the SEC or the ACC to feel like they should have at least 2, if not more? Or does that still keep them as a one-bid league similar to the Big 12?
Do you want to take this year for an example?
Let's take this year.
Let's take this year. Virginia and Duke played in the championship game. Why Duke was in it, I have no idea. Now, Duke won that game and knocked Virginia out. If Duke loses that game and Virginia wins it, we're talking about Virginia right now being in the playoff and Miami being out.
Yeah, sadly, Miami's out instead of Alabama.
Right.
The whole thing is it comes back to Alabama being in on name only, basically.
On their legendary status. Bear Bryant and all the people and Nick Saban and all that. They've been good for so long. They just can't get over the fact that, hey, it's okay if they don't have a great year one time, but they can't let them not have a good year. They've got to put them in someplace they really shouldn't be.
Well, let's also remember the fact that it was an SEC administrator, AD, that was the head of the selection committee this year. And what do we have? We have 5 SEC teams in the playoffs.
Yep.
So
now, Now, I'm not advocating for the Big Ten to have 4 because I don't think the Big Ten had 4 good teams that should have been in the playoff. 3, yes. 4, no. So, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a Big Ten homer and I think that you should have taken an SEC team out and put a Big Ten team in its place, even though that Big Ten team didn't deserve it. I'm not going to say that because they didn't. They had 3 teams, Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon, that deserved to be in it, and no one else did.
Yep.
But I think
then take a look at some of the other teams that might have been deserving. Did BYU deserve to be in? Their only 2 losses were to Texas Tech.
No.
Did Notre Dame? We've already talked about them. And again, nothing against the group of 5 teams, but why 2? Why are there 2 in there?
Let's expand on that. Let me ask you a question. If we're going to put in the 12 best teams, do you think Notre Dame would have beaten either Tulane or James Madison at any point this season?
By 30.
Yes. So why are we talking about, hey, don't get me wrong, Tulane and James Madison, you guys had great seasons. You had absolutely fantastic seasons. And you get rewarded for your fantastic season. But I think you shouldn't be playing in the playoff. I'm sorry. Your team's not as good as some of the teams that were not invited.
Okay, so wasn't there a clause that a group of 5 team is in?
Probably.
But it's the highest group of 5. So why are there 2 when Tulane finished below Iowa in the college football rankings?
So did JMU.
Yeah. Was it? Maybe it was
23
JMU
and 25. One of them 23 and 25, was it? Or
Iowa was like 22nd?
23rd, I think.
Okay, so anyway, you got teams that fell below an 8-4 team that are in the playoffs just because you wanted to. I mean, that just doesn't make sense. I get, if they have contractual obligations to put one of the group of 5 teams in, typically it's the best group of 5 team, highest ranked, whatever. Okay. I can get behind that to an extent of, yeah, if you're going to be fair about it, you want to give them a shot, fine. That's great. But there's no reason that there should have been 2 of them this year.
Right.
Absolutely no reason for 2 of them, especially if that second team didn't just barely crack the top 25. So if you're saying by the letter of the law, the CFP is saying they're number 25, they're obviously not one of the top 12 teams. So you don't have an obligation to put them in.
The issue with those being put in is, who did they play?
Nobody's.
What's their strength of schedule?
Tulane's biggest win by Power 4 standards was over Northwestern.
Yeah. And while Northwestern had a fair year.
Did James Madison even play a Power 4 team?
I don't know. I don't think they did anything. I mean, I haven't seen them up against the Georgias and the Alabamas and the anybody in the Big Ten. And if you do that and you win those games, absolutely come right on in. I have no problem with it. But you got to start scheduling out of conference games against good Power 5 legendary status teams. And if you want in, and then you can run your conference and win it. But you've got to play at least 3 or 4 of those games against Power 4 conference teams. You've got to.
It's very similar to the NCAA basketball, where you have the one bid leagues, whatever. You're champion, but it's the group of 5 is a one bid group. And there's not 2 teams in a group of 5 that deserve to be in the top 12, so to speak. Typically. Now, I'm not saying that JMU and Tulane are bad teams, because clearly they're good teams. They've won their games. JMU, they're probably the better of the 2. Tulane's losing their coach.
Yeah.
So, you penalized Florida State 2 years ago for losing their quarterback. You didn't penalize Ole Miss. You didn't penalize Tulane this year for losing their coaches, who are going into playoff games without a coach.
Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming that Tulane's head coach is going to coach them through the playoffs. That's fine. I know Ole Miss is not, because he's already packed up and shipped himself off to Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
So why did Ole Miss not get penalized for that? Who's going to coach them? There's double standards abound throughout.
Hypocrisy.
Yes. And it just, I don't know. I hate to say it. People will disagree with me, but if you're going to play the playoff this way, you might as well just go back to the old BCS 1 and 2. It makes the same amount of sense as it does now. It would have been, in this case, the national championship would have been a rematch. Well, they would have fixed it differently, but it would have been Indiana and Georgia this year.
Yeah.
Because they would have dropped Ohio State to 3rd. And Ohio State would have played Texas Tech for the right to be 3rd or 4th. And that's the way you probably should have done it. And that's because it doesn't make sense what you're doing now because it's too subjective. Again, I have no dog in a fight because we don't have anybody in there, but I think it's just, if you can't, you're not going to make everybody happy anyway, but you're not consistent.
With that being said, what's the next step? Is it to expand to 16 or is it to go back to 8?
I'd say, honestly, it was probably to go back to 8.
I agree. But there's always going to be, no matter how many people, how many games or how many teams you put in, there's always going to be that one team that maybe deserved to be in, but didn't get in. It's always going to happen. It's just the way it is.
Let me do this. If you looked and you went back to the top 8 or to an 8-team field, let's say, could you pick out 8 teams in the rankings that deserve to be the top 8? Absolutely.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
After 8, it becomes very subjective.
Cloudy.
I can pick 8 teams right off the top that we like. Yep, those are my 8. Those 8 teams are the 8 best teams this year.
Yeah,
based on their record, based on what they've done, I would have absolutely zero qualms about those top 8. After that, 9, 10, 11, and 12. That's very shady, especially when Alabama's 9.
They still would have figured out how to get them into the 8.
Oh, I'm sure they would have figured out a way to say, you know what? I just think that they're better than Oklahoma. So I think Alabama, because they played in the conference championship, we can't penalize them. Let's bump them ahead of Oklahoma.
Even though Oklahoma beat them head to head.
Yes, because it's Alabama.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they'd have done that because they'd have figured out a different way to do it so that the SEC would have still gotten 2 teams in over another team. So they would have put them ahead of, I don't know. They'd have figured out a way to put them ahead of Oregon.
Ole Miss. Oh, yeah, Oregon. Yeah. Even though Oregon had 1 loss all year, they would have put them in ahead.
Yeah, to the number 1 seed by 10 at home. But anyway.
Yeah.
Let's move on from that because we're not going to solve that conundrum anytime soon.
No.
But let's talk a little bit about those coaches moving on to different universities.
Were you at all surprised by Matt Campbell going to Penn State?
Was I surprised? Yes.
I wasn't. Not even a little bit.
Not surprised that he went somewhere. Surprised that Penn State settled for him. But I think it wasn't so much that they settled for him. I just don't think that all of their top choices went elsewhere. Didn't want anything to do with it. And I don't know, is there that much of a dumpster fire at Penn State that we don't know about that prevents people? Because to me, back in when we were younger, Penn State would have been like one of the penultimate dream jobs for about any coach.
Yeah.
But do people look at that and say, hey, here's Franklin who lost 30 games, 100 and some odd in 30 games lost, and they fired him because he wasn't good enough? And is that going to be my fate if I can't take him to the next level? Which, I think what they did is they hired the James Franklin of the Big 12, the team that can get a little bit more out of him, but never wins the big one.
Yeah, I think there was something in the way that they were trying to structure contracts that turned people off.
Yeah.
I think there was interest, and I think that is a lucrative, good job for people. I think that job is a very respected job. There's a lot of people that would probably be interested if they were to come calling. I just think that some of the ones that they were going after, and they were trying to structure the contracts to say if there's a buyout, they were going to have it be a small amount, or they weren't going to give them the amount of time that they asked for. There's things in those contracts that some people just couldn't get past. So, for them, maybe they restructured it and maybe they gave a little bit so that they could get Matt Campbell. Now, I've got proof of this, and if anybody asks, I can show it to them. 7 weeks ago, when James Franklin was fired, there was all these posts going around about who the next coach would be. And I said 7 weeks ago, might be closer to 8 now by the time it's all said and done. I said, Matt Campbell to Penn State. You heard it here first. And I have screenshots of that. So I feel like I was vindicated on that, even though there were times when I felt like it was not going to happen. But I guess when you throw enough darts at a dartboard, eventually you're going to hit the middle. So that's kind of like, or even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. So maybe that was my blind squirrel moment. But
so here's my question then. How long do you think he lasts at Penn State?
I think he's there 6 years out of the 8.
I think he makes 4 tops.
Well, think about what he's done at Iowa State with 3-star recruits, because they very rarely get 4-star recruits.
But he's doing it in the Big 12. That's not the Big 10.
That's true. However, if you give him the offense that he had at Iowa State and you put 4- and 5-star recruits in the places of the 3-star recruits, that's going to be a better team. And Iowa State was good enough to beat Iowa on a few occasions with him. So in
3 times
Penn State,
or 10 years
beat Iowa a lot of times. There was a lot of times Iowa beat Penn State. So, if you want to talk about apples to apples and oranges to oranges, I think he's going to be just fine from a talent standpoint. I think he's going to be able to recruit higher quality kids. I think he's going to be able to turn them into good players, motivate them. He's a very good motivator. I think he will be just fine there. I wonder if he's going to win at the rate that the Penn State administration and fans are going to accept. He's not going to, if he goes out and goes 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, 8-4, they're going to get rid of him. He's going to have to win 10 or 11 games on a somewhat consistent basis. I think they give you a pass if you lose to Ohio State. I think they give you a pass occasionally if you lose to Michigan, but you better not make it a habit. But you start losing to Iowa whenever you play them every 2 or 3 years. You start losing to
Indiana, Wisconsin,
Michigan State once in a great while, or you lose to Indiana a couple times. That's not going to settle well with them.
You lose to Minnesota or Nebraska, you're going to get fired immediately.
You might not even make the trip back.
And you should.
But so, yeah, there is that. One of the things that he said, I think Jamie Pollard maybe has said it when he had his interview, was that he, being Matt Campbell, wanted to go back closer to home. And I think he's got family, and I think that's where he grew up, is in the Ohio area, and that's a whole lot closer to Pennsylvania than Iowa is to Ohio. So that, I think his wife wanted to go back. I think she's from that area as well. And, I think he made his mind up when Penn State came calling that he was not going to, no matter what Iowa State did, no matter what counter offer Iowa State was going to give, it wasn't going to matter. And I think James Pollard knew that from the very beginning. It's the way he structured it, and he made me kind of feel like that's what he did, is he was going to go, and there wasn't anything they could do about it.
Well, from the things that I've been reading, Jamie Pollard may not be long for Iowa State.
Yeah, and that's true too. I'm kind of getting that impression also.
It sounds like he is a control freak that doesn't want to give up control, and that's where, like, TJ Otzelberger and Fennelly and Matt Campbell have all stepped in and said, "Hey, we need more of this," and he's like, "Nope, not going to get it from me." And they're like, "Okay." And I think that was that right there was one of the factors that drove him away, of making the decision easier for him to say, leave Iowa State for Penn State. Now, granted, yeah, Penn State's a far, far, far better job than Iowa State ever will be.
Yeah.
And that's I'm not saying that to be a jerk to Iowa State fans by any means. It's just the reality of the situation. They're fringe blue blood. I mean, they used to be a blue blood. who wouldn't take that if they had the opportunity? That'd be like saying, hey, you're a data analyst, but somebody's going to offer you a $100,000 a year job promotion to go be a manager of something that you love. You're going to jump all over that.
Yeah.
Now, whether you succeed at it, that's going to be completely up to you and how you put the effort you put into it. But I think it was a no-brainer for him in the first place. Once that came, any time a bigger school comes calling. Now, had it been Kansas, or let's say Kansas State lost their coach, maybe they called and said, hey, we'd like you to come down here at K-State. I think that's where he was like, yeah, I don't think that's more of a lateral move for me. That's not a jump up the ladder for me.
Agreed.
Or Michigan State for that matter. Michigan State was another one that would have came open. So, I mean, I don't fault him for doing it. I just don't see him having any more success at Penn State than what he had at Iowa State, and being relative to what I got to say how I want to state this. It's relative success. I'm not saying that, an 8-4 at Iowa State is the same as an 8-4 at Penn State. To me, an 8-4 at Iowa State is probably a 9-3 or 10-2 at Penn State. You're going to have to do that.
Yeah.
And so I don't see him having that style of sustained success at Penn State. That's why I said 4 years. I think he'll get those 9-3s, the 8-4 seasons, which, like you said, are good, but Penn State's not going to is going to say, no, that's not good enough, because we want somebody to take us to the next level. We want continuous, consistent playoff teams, and we're not seeing it. So thanks for your 4 years, but we're going to move on.
Yeah.
That's what I think is going to happen. Again, to me, I hope that's what happens. I hope they actually go 4-8 for the next 4 years, because it's Penn State and they're in our conference.
Yeah, I don't
want to see him succeed.
Yeah, I think if he goes 4-8, he's done. He's not even going to make.
If he goes 4-8, he's not going to make it past a year.
He might be gone before that, and they might just Nike or whoever the sponsor is will come in and say, "Yeah, here's the money."
I think they're an Adidas school, aren't they?
Adidas, yeah. Here's the money. Take him out to the train station.
Then he's looking at, well, I've made the leap. I've taken that chance of going to that upper level school. It didn't work out. Now I'm going to be looking back at the Ohios and the Toledos again, because I think that's going to burn your bridge a little bit with some of the higher Power 4 schools. You might get a job at, you could possibly get a job at Arkansas, because they're going to be hiring a new coach every 3 years. Ole Miss, LSU, those guys, they're going to be hiring coaches every 3 years.
However, if you are successful, then you can write your
just set yourself up for life. Yep.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. So there's motivation for him to be successful. I mean, everybody wants to be successful. Obviously, 2 teams play, only one can win.
Yep.
It's just whether you can win consistently enough.
There is one other coach I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about the new head coach at Michigan State, former
Fitzgerald
Wildcat. I think it's a great hire by Michigan State. I hate the fact that I have to hate him again, because I was actually getting to the point where I liked him. Big question, I think, is, does this kid go with him?
Well, everything I've heard is that he's not.
No. I have kind of heard that too, and I've kind of heard that there's not a lot of – the only position that I've heard there might be some defections at is at running back.
At Iowa.
Yes. And I don't – from what I've heard, I don't know if it's because of how crowded the room is, or if you've got schools that are going to be taking a run at like a Kamari Moulton, who has shown that he's capable, or I would be very, very surprised, and I hope I am surprised, but I'd be very surprised if Jazz Patterson's back next year.
That's the one I was thinking. If anybody jumped, it would be him. And I don't want to see it happen either. But I also don't want to see Nathan McNeil leave, because I think the kid's got a huge potential. I think his upside is through the roof.
I feel like Nathan McNeil next year will probably overtake the starting position by mid-season next year, if not before.
Well, that's
I think he is a feature.
Kamari comes back, that's going to be tough to do.
Well, hey, if I had a 1-2 monster of Kamari Moulton and Nathan McNeil, and they were both splitting about the same amount of carries, I would be completely happy with that.
Yeah. It's going to depend on what and we're not going to get into this now. We're going off the rails a little bit. I don't want to talk about the Iowa because we've got time to talk about Iowa. I do want to mention we're playing Vanderbilt in the Real Aquas Bowl for anybody that doesn't know. We've already talked about that. We will talk about that game in coming podcasts. We're more worried about right now what's going on in the current landscape. We'll get to the bowl games in future podcasts. So, be patient for that. And we'll talk about Iowa to the point of ad nauseum when it comes to Vanderbilt. Okay. So let's kind of start focusing more on, we're done with the coaching deal with Pat Fitzgerald. Do you want to talk about that a little bit longer?
I like the hire. I think it's a good hire for him. I just, like I said, I hate the fact that I have to dislike him again. But
having him roam the sidelines this year, it didn't bother me. But now that he's going to be at Michigan State, maybe I need to think back and say, maybe that's probably not the best thing that we could have done is let him run around the sidelines. However, he has coached against Iowa enough times that he could probably just pull out that sheet of paper that he has from back when he was a Northwestern coach with 7 lines on it and say, okay, yep, that's exactly what I remember from Iowa, and we can beat them with this.
Yeah.
So nothing new here. However, we do have Tim Lester. That's different. He's never coached against Tim Lester that I know of.
Unless he did it
2 years. He wasn't there last year. He wasn't there this year. So yeah, he's never coached against Tim Lester. So we'll see if Tim Lester gets to actually be the coach and gets to actually call the plays. Maybe that will throw a wrench into the works for Patty. He might have to actually do a little bit of homework. Might have to stay a couple hours late one night.
Well, shall we shift a little gears to some basketball?
Yeah, let's hit the Iowa basketball teams. Let's start with the women since they only had the one game, and that one game was not much of a game. I don't understand. Iowa ended up winning that game against Rutgers 79-36, and it wasn't even that close. Either Iowa is really, really good, or Rutgers is really, really bad.
And I think it's a combination of both. And I know that's a cop out, but
that was at Rutgers, though.
Yeah,
I mean, you feel like you have a little bit of comfortability with your own home court, and they had 8 points after the first quarter. Was it 6?
Six of the first quarter, 14.5.
I mean, I scratched my head how bad they were.
And wait a minute,
this is embarrassing.
They only had 4. They only had 18 going into the fourth quarter, right?
Yeah, it was bad. It was so bad. It was so. I mean, I'm almost embarrassed just thinking about how bad they are.
Well, I think it's a combination of both. I think it's a combination of Iowa is very good, especially at what they do. And I was a little concerned when I first heard like lineups and stuff, and I'm like, Rutgers has got some size. They got some 6'3" girls, that might give a little bit of fits to us. And no, they had no answer for Ava Heiden.
They were horrible. Ava just had her day. She could have scored 40 on these guys.
Yeah, honestly, I think that could have been a game where Iowa put up 100.
Oh, easily. When Iowa shoots 49% on the opposing team's court, and the opposing team, who is their home court, shoots 22% for the game, and they shoot 8% from 3-point line and 54% from the free throw line, and Iowa out assists them 26-6.
What did the rebounding look like? I didn't.
39-31 Iowa.
That's not that bad. But I mean, that's That's looking for a shine on a turd that's not there.
Yeah, that's looking for something that you're just not going to find. The one thing though that I think Iowa needs to really seriously really work on is their free throw shooting. They only shot 50% at Rutgers. Now, Taylor McCabe had a great game. You know, she was 4-6 from 3, 14 points. Journey Houston had a really nice game from a freshman standpoint, 14 points on 6 of 9 shooting. But that free throw shooting,
it's going to cost
that is going to come back and bite you one day. When it's a close game and you have very thin, razor thin margin of error against a really good team, and you need to make those free throws, 50% is going to get you beat.
Yeah. The Michigans, the UCLAs, the USCs, those teams are
Maryland
coming up.
Maryland, I watched the end of that game with Minnesota, and
Minnesota imploded.
Oh, they absolutely collapsed. They had a 9-point lead
with 38 seconds left.
With 47 seconds left and 47. Lost.
Yeah.
They just couldn't handle it.
It's surprising, the way that ended up. I'm surprised they didn't lose by double digits. That's how bad they played in that last 47 seconds.
And I got to blame the coach on this deal because she had a timeout to advance the ball and she kept holding on to it and it kept imploding at the other end. I think if you take one of those early, you take a timeout early in that last overtime, that second overtime, you take that and you move that ball to the other end of the court. I think Maryland panics at that point. I think they foul you. I think you go to the line. I think that's where you seal the deal. But she decided not to take that timeout and held on to it and then took it at the end when it was 99-98.
I don't know how that works with because I remember something about if you inbound the ball or try to inbound the ball or something and then you have to call a timeout. You can't advance it. You can't.
But she had ample opportunities when Maryland was making shots and they were going to the end line to try to take the ball out. They could have very easily have called a timeout after any one of those 3 baskets that they made to make it close.
Yeah.
And I just kind of said, that's on the coach because she should have taken that timeout and advanced that ball earlier. But like when it was 99-92, she should have said, okay, timeout. We're going to bring it up and advance it.
Yeah.
Well, but she didn't do that and waited too late.
And that's why you're not a ranked team. And that's why you are at Minnesota and not at Maryland or UConn or South Carolina.
Yeah. So Iowa improves to 9-0. This week is going to be the test. This is going to be the best team that they'll face all year. Well, not all year. So far.
To date.
And that is Iowa State on Wednesday, and that is a 6:00 game on ESPN. So mark your calendars, mark it to be taped if you can't watch it, because that's going to be one that we're going to have to. That's going to be one that you're going to be on the edge of your seat.
This is one where I'm it's going to be very, very telling early as to how this game is going to go. It would be how they're going to call inside post play when it comes to Ava Hayden, Layla Hayes, and
against Audie Crooks. Yep.
Audie Crooks, not Eddie.
Audie, yeah. So, and there's always been that
camping in the lane.
Camping in the lane. I was just going to say that. There's been that thing about her camping in the lane, and
yeah, she's the sponsor for the Camping World Bowl.
It can't be allowed to happen. And if I'm Jan Jensen, I'm talking to the refs ahead of time saying, hey, we've been watching tape on this girl. She spends a lot of time in the lane. There should have been a lot of 3-second calls on her. You might want to make sure that you keep an eye on her camping out in that lane. Whether it makes any difference, whether it does any good or not, I'd still plant the seed.
Problem is you're talking about women's Big Ten officials.
I know they're so bad.
Women's basketball officials in general, they're terrible.
Yeah,
the game's too fast for them. They don't know how to. They don't know how to call a game. But,
so. Let's move on and we'll hit the men's and then we'll call it a night. 1-on-1 week, a learning experience at Michigan State. I wouldn't call that much a game.
You learned what it's like to play 5-on-8.
Yep. You were affected by the Izzo effect. Now, don't get me wrong. Michigan State, good team, really good team, probably a Final Four Elite Eight team, no question.
And that's the thing that bugs me the most about it is they didn't need the help.
They didn't need the help. But when you walk into the Breslin Center and Tom Izzo's prowling that sideline, and he's the master manipulator that we all know that he is,
the whiner,
the opposing team, doesn't matter who you are, you're never going to get a call in Breslin Center.
Certainly not as a new coach.
Not as a new coach. But here's what Iowa needed to do with that is they needed to learn how Big Ten games are officiated and how physical Big Ten games are. With this being their first one, being at Michigan State, I think there's a lot that they can take away from this. There's a lot to learn from this. And that will then educate them on how they need to practice against it and what they can and can't get away with. There's a lot to learn from that game, from not only from Ben McCollum, but from the team.
Here's the crux of that. And I think this is the problem that Iowa's going to face this year is officials and other opposing coaches, all that, are not used to Iowa playing defense at all. So, we go from Iowa being one of the least foul or teams with the least amount of fouls called on them to one of the teams with the most amount of fouls called on them, because I think the officials don't know what to expect. So everything is like, well, they made a good defensive play. That had to be a foul. And instead of allowing them to play defense, I found the Maryland game to be unwatchable. In the second half, especially, every time Farrell Payne got the ball, I was like, well, let's see him at the line here shortly, because that's where he's going to be, because every time he touched the ball, there was going to be a foul on Iowa, regardless of what happened.
Part of that, though, we'll talk about Maryland here, but part of that, though, I think is the fact that is a very physical player, Payne. And I knew right off when he won the tip, I said, oh, this guy's going to be a problem for us. We don't have anybody physically that can match up with somebody his size. And so then when you don't have somebody that can physically match up with him size-wise and maybe even athleticism-wise, you tend to reach, you tend to be desperate when it comes to guarding him and trying to stop his post moves. And I think sometimes you do things you shouldn't do, and you do things you are not taught to do or taught not to do. So, I mean, let's hope that we don't see players that are his size and ability and physicalness, and we are going to see that. So they're going to have to figure it out.
Well, here's the thing. He's 6'9", 250, same size as Cam Manio.
I thought he was taller than Cam by quite a bit.
Nope, 6'9", 250.
Yeah. I don't think Cam plays as physical. I think Cam's more of a fast player.
No, but still, there's a problem. To me, I feel like there's a problem when a team walks into your building and shoots 3 times as many free throws as you. Now, do I think that Iowa probably fouls a little bit on their defense? Absolutely. But other teams do the same thing and get away with it. Michigan State holds, bumps, fouls. They're physical with it. They don't get called, even when they're on the road. Now, granted, that's the Izzo effect. But they're not the only team that does it. Illinois does it. Purdue does it.
Do you think, and we always used to say this back in the day, that when a freshman comes in and, let's say he's a star freshman and he plays a lot, do you feel like back then we always felt like the referees would always give the benefit of the doubt to people other than the freshman? In other words, anytime the freshman did something and it was questionable, it was always a foul on them or it was always against them because they're freshmen. They need to learn how things work here in the Big Ten, and you'll get your day coming up. You'll need to know your place, and your day's coming, and those fouls won't be on you as you grow older. You think they're doing the same thing to Ben McCollum?
I think it's just a simple fact that they're not used to Iowa playing defense at all.
Yeah.
And to see Iowa out there to me, the way I would describe Iowa's defense is it's kind of like a boa constrictor. They just slowly strangle you. And they're, officials aren't used to that from Iowa. And I don't know if it's, that, and it shouldn't matter.
Fans aren't used to that from Iowa.
But, how do you call an Iowa game when you're not used to them actually playing defense?
You have to adapt. I mean, just the referees have to adapt to the way the game's being played. And they'll understand.
I understand your wording on that of, freshman, you're going to get your day. You're not going to get the benefit of the doubt right now. I think I hate that.
I do too.
Because a foul is a foul, regardless of whether you're a freshman, a senior, or if you're 95 years old. A foul is a foul. And I've always said it, when teams are up, I remember watching the kids when they played in junior high and high school. And a team would be up by 25 or 30 late in the game, and they were allowed to do whatever because the officials didn't want to call a foul because they just wanted to get the game over with. Like, you aren't teaching them anything if you don't call a foul when it's a foul. You call it a foul whether that's the game's 35-point lead or if it's a 5-point lead. It's a foul regardless. And that's the only way you teach kids at that age that's you can't do that. I don't care what the score is. You cannot do that. And it's the same thing when it comes to college. I don't care who the coach is or what it is. Call a foul if it's a foul. But if you're going to not call it for one team and you're going to call it on the other, that's a problem too.
I sat here and we're talking about Michigan State, and it was, I don't know if anybody said, but it was 71-52, and it wasn't even that close. But I'm looking at the stats here. I wrote down the stats for the game, and I'm going to talk about team stats. I'm not even going to go over who did what. But there's two things that are glaring here that I think could tell you the tale that if you didn't watch the game, it would tell you who won. Iowa shot 38% from the field. Michigan State shot 50%. But the one that really jumps out at you is rebounds. Michigan State 33 rebounds, Iowa 15.
Yeah.
If you're going to point to something, that's the one thing that Iowa needed to do that they did not do is rebound.
What was the rebounding margin in the Maryland game?
Hold on. Rebounds, Maryland 38, Iowa 30.
But Iowa shot a lot better.
Yeah.
10 times better.
54% to their 38 against Michigan State.
Yeah. I say
Maryland shot 36%.
You can get away with being out rebounded if you're shooting the ball well.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
cannot mask a rebounding deficiency if you can't hit the broadside of a barn.
But the two stats, we'll go to the Maryland game here real quick. Iowa won 83-64, 19-point lead or win. Bennett Sturt scored 25, Cam Manyow 7 rebounds, 3 assists. The two stats that jump out on this game, and I've got them both circled here, is assists. Iowa had 19 assists to Maryland's 7. Then the other one was steals. Iowa had 12 steals to Maryland's 4. Otherwise, Iowa 10 turnovers, Maryland had 18. That's kind of a difference. But the rebounds, Iowa was out rebounded by 8. Free throw percentage, Iowa shot 50% from the free throw line. Another team that needs to get free throws figured out. But Iowa shot 41% from 3 to Maryland's 30.
And how many free throws did Maryland end up making? Was it like 26 of 36 or 24 of 36?
Well, whatever, 63% of whatever they shot.
I kind of felt like Iowa suffocated them on defense, and the officials were like, this game's going to get out of hand and ugly if I don't start calling some fouls and allowing Maryland to stay in this game.
Yeah.
And I think Iowa did a very good job. They had the game plan of let Maryland be Maryland. Let them do what Maryland does, which is hero ball. You've got 5 guys that aren't used to playing together, so they're not playing together. They're playing one-on-one. Iowa goes out and plays 5-on-1 then. We're going to move the ball around. We're going to run our offense, whereas I don't feel like Maryland really had an offense. It was however they could try to get someplace where they could isolate or get that post player isolated. If they couldn't do that, they didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Iowa just basically suffocated them, squeezed them until they just had nothing left to give.
I do want to do a shout out for two players that I thought really had nice games that really contributed. Tate Sage came off the bench and I thought had a really nice game. He had 12 points and 4 rebounds. And then Cooper Koch was a starter, but he was 3 of 4 from 3-point line and 11 points and 3 boards. Their next game, as the women play also, they play Iowa State. This game is on Thursday. It's in Ames, just like the women's game. They odd years in Ames, even years in Iowa City. Just remember that. And it's a 7:00 start on FS1. So mark your calendar, mark your, get ready to tape it if you can't watch it in person or at home. So get your tapers, your whatever you do.
So I want to go back to the guys you highlighted. One of the guys I want to talk about is Cooper Koch. And I want to make this quick because I know we're way over time on this.
Yep.
You can tell a lot about where a player's standing is when you look at Cooper Koch and you look at the fact that he's averaging 35 to 36 minutes a game. He's the second most behind Bennett Sturts. So that's telling you he has the most trust outside of Bennett Sturts on that team from the coach.
As a redshirt freshman.
And I think he's earned that.
So,
and I think, honestly, outside of him, I'd say Tate Sage is probably be the next guy that has the most trust, other than maybe Isaiah Howard. Isaiah Howard plays a very nice game for a guy that doesn't look like he would be as athletic as he is and as relentless as he is. I'm highly impressed with him.
Yeah, I think what Ben McCollum does is he not only, I think he plays the seniors and the older players, but I think he also makes sure that he brings along the younger guys so that sets the table for next year. Cooper Koch being exactly who we're, and then Tate Sage also, they're spending extra time on those guys, knowing full well that they're going to be the future. They're going to be the future stars of this team. And we're not just going to leave them on the bench and let them watch for a year and then expect them to be what we want them to be. Mm-hmm. We're giving them additional playing time. Cooper Koch getting 35 minutes a game or 34, whatever he is getting, is fantastic. My only problem with that is don't wear the kid down. He is coming off of an injury season. I don't want to lose him halfway through the season for some stress fracture of playing too much.
Yeah,
so
but
when you get games like this where you're up 19, get him off the court.
I think the style of play, though, is what allows him to be on there longer. People talk about Bennett Sturts playing 38 minutes a game. The slower style allows him to play those because he is able to take a little bit of time off on the offensive side and on the defensive side a little bit, just based on that, more on the offensive side because he doesn't have to move around as much. I don't know. It's just at least what I've seen in the 9 games that they've played so far is that he appears to have the ability to rest on offense a little bit, which sounds really weird to say, but it doesn't wear him out like the high-paced offense that Fran McCaffrey would have ran. Right. You'd have had to have had guys that moved in and out of that lineup to play that frantic pace. Whereas, even on fast break opportunities, if it's not a true 3 or 4-on-1 fast break opportunity, he's slowing it down. And, people talk about the pace of play, and yeah, Iowa has a slow pace of play, but they still put points on the board.
They're pretty efficient.
They're efficient.
Yeah.
And I don't care if the pace of play is slow. If they're efficient and they're making their shots, they can play slower. That's going to limit the other team's ability to score too.
I really like
be more efficient.
I really like that he's mixing in the young guys with the older guys and the ones that are be here next year, and the ones that are going to not be here next year. So, and he's building, and he's doing it the right way. He's doing it the smart way. I like the way everything's going with Iowa. I think they're going to win games that they're supposed to win, and I think they're going to pull a few upsets that they're not supposed to win. But I think there's going to be teams like Michigan's going to beat the crap out of them, just like they're beating everybody else. hopefully we keep it close. Iowa State, oh my God, them beating Purdue at Purdue by 23. It just
doesn't bode well.
No, it doesn't.
But the teams you're talking about, I can see them knocking off an Illinois.
Yeah.
Beating Indiana.
Oh yeah. I don't think Indiana's very good.
Ohio State, I think that's a team that they'll be able to compete well with.
Yeah.
Purdue, I'm not sure because I just think the size of Purdue's 7-foot giants is going to be too much for them. But, if we're looking at teams like Michigan State, Purdue as games that we're probably not going to win, I think most of those are single games in the conference.
Purdue's a 2. We have a home and away with Purdue.
And, if Purdue's not hitting shots, they have a very good shot of being able to beat Purdue.
The only 2 teams that we play 2 games are Purdue home and away and Nebraska home and away.
Which this year is not a great time to have Nebraska twice, but I think Nebraska will get exposed before long because their record is a indication of their schedule so far. Now, granted, they've played some decent teams. Don't get me wrong.
They knocked Creighton down a peg or 2 yesterday.
Creighton's not very good.
I know Creighton's not their shell of what they were, but they have been a decent team.
Creighton's learning that you take Iowa's cast-offs and you can't expect to win.
No.
Owen Freeman's done absolutely nothing.
He had 0 points, I think, against Nebraska yesterday.
Yeah.
Josh Dix only had 9.
Yeah. I'm looking back at it, I'm like, I'm glad they're gone.
Yeah, at this point.
So let's wrap this up. This is really late. Anything else you want to talk about basketball wise?
No.
They do have 2 games this week. It is Iowa State on Thursday and then is it Bucknell?
Bucknell on the 20th.
Sunday. No, they have somebody on Sunday though. Is it Western in Michigan? Western Michigan.
Okay.
On the 12th, whatever day that is. So maybe it's Thursday, Saturday. That is a home game. We talked about possibly going to that maybe. So they do have 2 games this week. So hopefully we can let's hope for a 1-1. Be nice to get a 2-0, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, I don't either. Not on the road.
I think there's like 3 teams in the country that are head and shoulders above the rest of them, and unfortunately Iowa State is one of them.
At this point,
Michigan is another one.
Yep.
And outside of that, I don't know if there's another team that is as good as those 2.
Did I see that Arizona was number 1 in the nation, and then Michigan 2 and Iowa State 3? Is that what I saw?
Yeah, probably. So there you go.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the right order they should be in. Although Arizona and Michigan have proven it more than Iowa State, and that's not saying anything against Iowa State because they just beat Purdue and they beat St. John's, but
Auburn.
And they beat Auburn, but so did Michigan.
Right. Yeah,
and Michigan beat them badly.
Yeah, well, Michigan's beating everybody badly.
Yeah,
it's a machine up there.
Yeah. So, well, let's wrap it up. You like the content? Give us a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. If you feel so inclined to buy some merchandise to help support the channel, give us a little bit of publicity, that'd be great. Barcode's at the very beginning of the episode here. Outside of that, catch us on our social medias, Spotify podcasts as well. If you don't want to listen to us on YouTube, you don't want to see our faces, that's great. That's fine. You can listen to us on Spotify. Sorry. Otherwise, we'll be back next week. Probably start doing this more on Sunday night, Monday, just because football season is wrapped and I want to get those Sunday games. Big Ten doesn't normally play on Mondays, so Monday might be the day to do this and get all the stuff through the week in on one podcast. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, that's all I've got for the week. I'll round it off on a Go Hawks and get out of here.
All right. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.